welcome to the lesson on the three-part user story, defining work meaningfully. In this lesson, you'll learn the central approach to requirements gathering used on every Agile project in the world of Applied Scrum. First, a user story is a form of system requirements. These requirements are used to plan and test the work that the development team performs. There are three parts to a user story. There's a value statement about what the product must do for the business, the assumptions that limit the solution, and the acceptance criteria that defines how to test if the solution meets the need. Each part of the three-part user story works together to form the complete user story. It is not just the value statement, although writing a good value statement is the hardest part of writing any user story. So, what is the proper means of creating a value statement? Well, as a user type, or who, I want to do some function, or what, in order to do something important, the why. Note the who is the user, either directly using or consuming outputs from the product the development team is building. It's important all users are clearly defined already in the project charter. This ensures there's a clear understanding when, say, the term end user is put into the who part of the value statement. Usually end user is too vague. It should be a description title such as research librarian or fighter copilot. The what should be the most important aspect of the component being built, often because products or even small components can meet many needs of many users. This can cause competition in terms of how to design the user interface or elements. When multiple value statements could be in the user story, make sure that the one that is put in the value statement is the priority. Priorities matter because a product that does everything for everyone in the end serves no one well. It is also very important the what, or functionality desired, should be stated in only business terms. Examples. I want to log in using my username and password. Wrong. I want to access my account. Right. If this doesn't quite make sense yet, it will with practice. Lastly, the why it's important is a critical failing of most user stories. This is true for experienced and beginning Scrum teams. The easiest trap is to simply restate the what in another way, such as, I want to log in to access my account. As stated above, the proper what in the statement is access my account. So what's the why it could be? To check notifications, to assign work, to check the rankings of my fantasy football team. Whatever the top reason for the story, for this functionality, put it in the value statement. It's amazing how much innovation happens when you understand why someone wants to sign in. Many stories are dropped or changed because the why shows a better way. Then there are the assumptions. Assumptions go beyond being limits or constraints on the solution for a user story. Here are some additional ways assumptions can add value to a user story as a bucket for everything else you need to know. Assumptions can capture less important value that should also be generated by the user story as secondary benefits. Assumptions can capture details of why the users will find this story important. Often this needs more input than just what fits in the user story. This keeps the user story clean and readable while capturing context. The assumptions should identify constraints from preceding or proceeding tasks, work, components, etc. that are used by or limit the solution. Perhaps this component must keep its interface simple and flexible for stories the team knows will be built in the future as dependent features. They should also capture standards, influences, and reference architectures that are important for meeting stakeholder expectations in the solution. For example, building a search should perhaps work like Google. Assumptions also capture less important reasons why this story might be valuable to the identified end user or stakeholders. Finally, the assumptions can limit how the acceptance criteria and the value statement are met during testing. It's important to understand that assumptions don't just impact the value statement, but also acceptance criteria. Also, it's important to note that standard information such as procedures captured in the definition of done do not have to be recaptured again in the assumptions, nor, for that matter, in the acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria are the tests that must be passed by a user story before a story can be accepted by the customer. This usually takes the form of a list of test cases and scenarios that should be checked by the product owner on a working system. A story is considered done when it passes all the acceptance criteria and does so according to the project's definition of done. Here are some additional key items to remember about acceptance criteria written for user stories. Acceptance criteria are not restatements of the value statement. Make sure it's a test that addresses both the value statement and the assumptions. Secondly, the criteria should clearly define the primary use cases for testing. Without this, the test development will be aimless or miss the product owner's intent. Third, the acceptance criteria must specify any performance or loading that the product increment should meet. This should be above and beyond the standard for typical user stories. This could include non-functional elements like security. And fourth, make sure the acceptance criteria are comprehensive in detailing all tests that will be run to close the story. More is better in this case because it removes ambiguity from requirements, testing, and development. Finally, it's important to note that all user stories should be modular in testing as well as development and definition. Don't create dependencies where those dependencies don't need to exist. If written correctly, acceptance criteria should have no dependencies on other stories whatsoever. As stated in the Scrum Team Foundations lesson, all user stories are governed by the project's definition of done. In this way, the definition of done is the hidden fourth part of any user story, although it is focused on process for closing a story. The definition of done captures all the standard requirements for completing work defined in a user story, such as standard approvals, reviews by stakeholders, prototyping, if required, documentation for sustainability, reporting, and so on, design constraints for compliance, integration, and so on. And in this way, the definition of done helps to modularize the statements within a user story so that they can be closed separately. It also provides a clear set of expectations around quality control and sustainability. These benefits are further elaborated in another part of this course and in greater depth through the Agile Project Management Certificate Program. We hope this explanation of the three-part user story was helpful for you. If you want to learn more, you can research using the notes or consider verifying to gain access to additional content and tools that help you take these ideas even further. Thanks again for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the rest of the course.